Welcome to the Stat AI podcast.
Welcome to the future of emergency medicine, a realm where artificial intelligence isn't just a buzzword, but a beacon of hope and a tool for transformation. I'm DJ Apakama. My co-host Ethan Abbott and I are both emergency physicians, and we have witnessed firsthand the burgeoning role of AI in our field. Our everyday experience grappling with healthcare disparities and social challenges have led us to a pivotal question. In the wave of AI applications, what changes are coming to emergency medicine, and will they be for the better? This podcast was born not just to ask these critical questions, but to seek out answers from the experts, to understand and to demystify the potential of AI in emergency medicine. We believe in bringing this conversation to the wider community to embrace AI as a tool for positive change. This podcast is our exploration of that future, a journey we invite you to join. So let's embark on this path together to learn, to question, and to envision a new era of emergency medicine enhanced by the power of AI.
On this episode of the Stat AI podcast,
Hey, DJ, how's it going today?
Hey, Ethan, it's going great. And we've got a fascinating task. Today we're tackling a somewhat controversial question. Can AI models replace human software engineers? And more importantly, can they make real money doing it? That's exactly what researchers set out to answer in a new study called SWE Lancer. Can frontier LLMs earn $1 million from real-world freelance software engineering? And this is a preprint. It was published on Archive very recently, February 19th, 2025. And what the researchers set out to answer in this new study was to see how well frontier AI models can compete with real-world freelance software engineers. And the benchmark is based on 1,488 real coding tasks that were basically uploaded from Upwork. And the total of all of those tasks was a $1 million payout. But here's the kicker. Despite all the recent hype around AI and software development, not a single model was able to complete most tasks successfully. Even the best performing model, Claude 3.5 Sonnet, only completed 26% of coding tasks and 45% of managerial tasks, which earned it about $400,000 out of the $1 million that was total. So what does this mean for the future of software engineering? Are AI models still just glorified assistants, or are we on the verge of seeing AI-powered freelancers outcompete humans?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, DJ. And what's interesting about this study, SWE Lancer, is that isn't just like another programming sort of benchmark. This is a kind of a real-world study, not just coding competitions or like toy problems. And I really want to highlight what the study tested. So the study tested two AI models in two major roles. So they wanted to look at individual contributor tasks or IC tasks. And these are hands-on coding problems ranging from quick bug fixes worth $50 to full implementations, which would have paid out $32,000. AI models had to submit working code that passed end-to-end tests, just like a real freelance software engineer would do. And then the second major role was software engineering manager tasks, or what they called SWE manager tasks. Instead of writing code, the AI had to evaluate multiple proposals from human engineers and choose the best solution, mimicking a sort of technical lead that might be present in a company. So I think the question is, why would this matter? Because freelance platforms like Upwork and Fiverr are major economic drivers in software development these days. If AI can reliably complete these tasks, we're looking at a very disruptive shift in the job market, one where companies might start hiring AI instead of people. But as the results show, I think it really shows we're not there yet.
And that's where things get interesting. And let's talk about how these models actually performed at these roles. So for hands-on coding tasks, models struggled badly. Even the best AI, Claude 3.5 Sonnet, completed just 26% of tasks, like I said, which means that 74% of the problems were just too difficult for AI to solve correctly.
Why? Because coding in the real world is messy. Unlike programming challenges, these tasks required AI to navigate complex, multi-file repositories, understand undocumented edge cases, adapt to unstructured problem descriptions, and then implement solutions that passed rigorous end-to-end tests. And when the AI failed, it often misunderstood the root cause of the issue or submitted a partial fix that didn't fully solve the problem. And on the flip side, the management side, AI models performed significantly better. For tasks where AI had to evaluate proposals instead of writing code, Claude 3.5 Sonnet managed to get a 45% success rate. And that suggests that AI might be better at reviewing code than writing it itself, at least for now.
Yeah, I think that's a crucial takeaway from this paper. I think AI models like GPT-4o and Claude 3.5 Sonnet aren't terrible at software engineering. They're just not reliable enough yet to replace human coders. And I think this brings up another critical point, the economic impact. So SWE Lancer mapped AI performance to real-world freelance rates, and here's what they found. They found the best AI model earned about $400,000 out of the $1 million available, meaning even at peak performance, AI had left over half the money on the table. Harder, higher-paying tasks were even more difficult. AI struggled with tasks valued above $2,000. And lastly, AI's contributions were in simpler, kind of well-defined bug fixes and technical assessments rather than the complex, multi-layered projects, as you alluded to. So I think this raises an important question. Will AI improve over time, or are we running into sort of fundamental limitations?
I think that's what makes SWE Lancer such a valuable benchmark. Unlike previous AI coding challenges, which tested the model in controlled environments, this study put AI in the real world, where ambiguity, edge cases, and project complexity cannot be avoided. So what's even more revealing is that AI performed worse on large, complex code bases, showing that while it excels at short, isolated problems, it struggles with the long-term reasoning and holistic system design required for these more advanced problems. But let's not underestimate the progress we've seen. In just 2 years, AI models struggled with basic coding tasks, and now they can evaluate complex software proposals and generate partially correct solutions. So where does this leave us? AI isn't ready to replace software engineers, but it's getting better at augmenting them. Companies might start using AI for these cheaper, low-skill coding work, but human expertise is still critical for complex software projects. And AI's biggest potential in software engineering might be as an advisor, code reviewer, and productivity booster rather than a standalone freelancer, which I think that kind of fits in with the ethos that we normally try to state around here, which is that these systems are meant to be used with humans, not in absence of them. And of course, there's also the ethical side. So if AI does get better at freelancing, then what is going to happen to human engineers?
I think that's exactly what we need to keep an eye on. The impact of AI software engineering isn't just about model accuracy, it's about economic disruption. And if you think about it, if AI can complete even 30 to 40% of freelance coding jobs, that's millions of dollars in lost income for human developers. And if companies start relying on AI software, how do junior engineers get their experience and training? And then I think lastly, one of the major questions is, and what happens when an AI makes mistakes? Unlike a human freelancer who's accountable for their work, AI-generated code has really no built-in responsibility model. For now, I think the takeaway, at least for me, is AI is an incredibly powerful tool, but not an independent software engineer. Companies looking to replace coders and AI really are going to be, I think, disappointed by this. But those using AI as an assistant will likely see these real productivity gains.
So I think the bottom line is that AI freelancing is still an experiment, but one we need to take seriously. SWE Lancer gives us a realistic picture of what AI can and can't do in software engineering. So if you're a software developer, this is not the end of your job, but it is a sign that AI is moving into your space. And the question isn't whether AI will impact software engineering, it's how we will adapt to it. And I feel like that's a question that Ethan and I have all the time. And what do you guys think? Will AI ever be able to work as an independent freelancer, or are there some things that will just always require human expertise? Let's keep the conversation going. And I think we have a fantastic guest to talk about this today. That's Dr. Tom Fadial.
Yeah, and I think he is going to have some real insight into some of this we discussed here today. And I think this article is highly applicable to some of the work that he does in building many of the projects that we use in emergency medicine practice today.
All right, today we are joined by Dr. Tom Fadial. He is an emergency medicine physician, software developer, and interface designer dedicated to improving the efficiency and effectiveness of medical workflows. He's a staff physician at the West Los Angeles VA Medical Center, where he combines his clinical expertise with a passion for technology to create intuitive digital tools for emergency medicine providers. Dr. Fadial is the creator of multiple web and mobile applications, including the Nerve Block app, Fractures, Suture, and ECG Stampede, all of which feature a minimalist, high-yield design tailored to fast-paced needs of emergency physicians. His work exemplifies the growing movement of physician-led innovation in medical software, providing bespoke, user-friendly solutions that enhance patient care and streamline clinical decision-making. Beyond development, Dr. Fadial is a vocal advocate for physician-driven technology, encouraging more clinicians to build tools that improve their own workflows. His website, fadial.com, showcases his projects and ongoing contributions to the intersection of medicine and software design. So without further ado, thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Fadial.
Yeah, thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited.
All right, so we were going to kick off with just a little bit of questions about your journey, how you got to the place you are today. Maybe before we jump into the very detailed questions, just tell us about your background and training and how you got to the position where you are today.
So I was fortunate, I think, in that I had a career before deciding to go into medicine, and that was focused on interface design. I was a little bit more heavily involved on like the UI design part and didn't really have much experience developing things myself. But as I got into med school and started my residency, I discovered a few tools out there that really made the development side a lot more accessible. And it was a little daunting at first, but as soon as I started playing around with some of these platforms and tools, I was like, oh, I could probably figure this out, and just like incrementally more complex with each application that I made. And I feel pretty comfortable tackling most projects now. There's like a suite of tools that I've grown comfortable with, and it's made it a lot more doable. But yeah, I really enjoyed working in interface design back in the day. And I think my very first website was in high school, and I used Microsoft Front Page, I think was the tool. So it's been a long time, and it's a fun journey.
Cool.
So when you are in the ED or in life, what is it that triggers you to say, I need to build a solution here, versus let me see if there's anything that's already out there existing? Like what kind of triggers that this needs a Fadial solution?
I mean, I think we've all kind of encountered those days in the ER where, oh, that can't be the best way to do this. And I
Totally.
definitely spend a little bit of time exploring existing solutions because there's no need to reinvent something that works really well. But I feel like a lot of the time I'm looking for something specifically for me. And the easiest approach is to just make that thing. And so a lot of the projects that I've worked on started off that way. Maybe there's something that kind of does something similar, but it's not exactly what I wanted. And so I make that thing. And if someone else finds it useful, great. Much to my wife's disappointment, pretty much everything I've made so far is free. And so it takes the pressure off, honestly,
Yeah.
because I feel like if I make something that I'm marketing and selling to people, then I have to attend to the feedback. And I feel like
Yeah.
I'm like, no, it's mine. You don't like it, you don't have to use it. I think that makes it a little bit less pressure.
Yeah, that's great. I think, yeah, if you start building things that people are paying for, and man, that's a whole different road for sure. Tell us a little bit about like how you balance your physician career and learning in coding and designing software. I think there's a lot of people, maybe now with large language models, there's less, but in generative AI, but I think a lot of people have a lot of fear about coding. And one of the questions we wanted to ask is, was there a moment when you felt when you're in over your head trying to build some of these applications?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. The landscape is definitely changing, and I think this will become something that anyone can tackle. The specific path that resulted in me taking more on from the development side was I have this website that I think I started in med school called DVXOf, which is like a library of algorithms that again I found useful. And I really wanted a mobile app. And so I ended up finding a grant that helped this team build out the first version of the application, and it was awful. It was the end product was so disappointing. I remember you would launch the application and then there was no feedback that anything was loading. So it was just like blank for 30 seconds and then something would pop up. I was like, I can't even release this. But they used something that I've ended up becoming very dependent on, which is this platform from Meta, Facebook called React Native. And it's like a JavaScript framework for building cross-platform. So iOS, Android, and now web. And I looked through their code and I was like, I get it. Like, it's fairly simple. JavaScript is one of the more accessible languages, I think. And it would just say like loading equals this. And then you could actually have that interactive state that I was looking for. And I pieced it together from there. I do agree that it's going to be much easier for anyone to do stuff like this. And honestly, like every day, every week, there's a new tool out there to gen AI, gen UI. Like, you can just type up what you want and get something that it works pretty well, potentially as a final product, or at least a prototype that you can test out and then see if there's demand for it.
I think I happened to find your apps via one of our residents who was using it and loved it. And apparently it's a secret in the residency that they all really enjoy your products. When I look at them, what I see is a very clean, minimalist design. When I'm on shift and I want to just know what I want to know, I'm not looking to type in a bunch of things. And it really seems that you took that into account when you were building your apps. I wonder, was that intentional or did that kind of come about after a series of iterations?
Yeah, it's always a struggle. Every app, there's a graveyard of design compositions where I've tried out like a wireframe and I hate it. And then I start working on the brand and it's grosses me out. And you just keep grinding and it'll be composition 12 where I'm like, oh, I see something here. And then you grow that one and then it's 12F. And then finally you're like, I'm satisfied with how this looks. And I think the simplicity part goes back to I make it for myself. And so I'm allowed to be opinionated. And I think a lot of tools out there, they will ask an expert for their input on a topic. And I think it's super helpful to have an expert participate in building something, but you do not want an expert creating a tool for emergency medicine physicians. You need to be opinionated. And like for fractures, for example, there's an outstanding sports medicine physician who had this beautiful database of content and recommendations. And they were generous enough to allow me and our team to use that to create the application. But then there's a lot of detail there that I just have to be like, no, we're not putting that in. And I think there's occasionally a cost that comes with that and that it's not going to work for everyone. And that's fine. But if you want the tool to have that aspect of you just get a recommendation and it tells you what to do, you have to decide, okay, maybe 98% of the time, that's right. 2% of the time, someone's going to be upset, but
Can't please all the people all the time.
I think with that in mind, it's a good segue to this question, which is emergency medicine is just known as a chaotic specialty. And I agree. There are times when you're working clinically and you're just like, what is going on here? How do you come up with design choices that help physicians in the middle of all this chaos? Are you thinking about that as you build your interfaces?
Yeah. And I think that's one of the harder things to do. Like when you're making something, you become so involved that it's hard for you to anticipate what the interaction will be like. You're designing it and you're coding it and you're like, okay, once this happens, I tap here. And when that happens, I tap here. And when you see someone use it for the first time, you're like, oh, they didn't tap where I thought they would tap. And I think having someone work alongside you, either using a prototype, and it can be really low fidelity things like just I've done this before with just sketches on a pad and watch people tap on my notebook. And that gives you the most useful information about what someone actually going to do instead of what do you think you would do in that scenario. So yeah, I think getting something in front of people so that you're not the main opinion on what's supposed to happen is the key step.
Oh, that's great insight. That's great.
Yeah. I wonder, looking back then on, and you can pick any of the apps or even the website, what are some of the kind of the most painful or frustrating lessons that you've learned when you're building these things?
Yeah, I think there's frustrations that arise on different levels. So from the UI standpoint, I think like I mentioned, there's kind of frustration in terms of getting the look right. I want things to have a certain appearance and I need it to be appealing to me to use. And so I think there's always a struggle where I don't believe that I'm going to get to a point where I like the product. And it's just deciding that no, I'm not going to accept this, even though it looks okay. I'm going to keep trying. I'm going to delete that old file and start over, and being willing to keep going until you're genuinely satisfied instead of convincing yourself that you're satisfied. And then from the development side, it's just the constant pain that is coding when you don't really have any background in the subject, where it's just like, why is this an error? Like what does that actually mean? And I think, I've gotten much more comfortable using AI for this purpose. And it's crazy what I feel comfortable doing now with that behind me, where I'm like, even if I don't understand something that I made 2 or 3 months ago, I just paste it in. What is this doing? It's, oh, here, this is what's happening and this is what you need to do next. Like I use the same really basic text editor for the first, God, I don't even know, like 15 years that I've been making stuff. And it was literally just a text editor with a project drawer and files on the side. And that's all it did. And then it was painful, but I started using code from Microsoft and now Cursor. And it's just night and day. I start typing something and then wait 4 seconds and then press tab. Wild. And it's exactly what I wanted to do. And it has comments. And then I can highlight that text and be like, no, this is actually what I wanted to do. And it just goes through. It's absolutely changed everything as far as me building stuff.
Wow, yeah, that's amazing. I think I'm an amateur coder, so but I do appreciate what you're saying. It's been transformative for for probably what DJ and I do is more maybe research driven stuff, but yeah, it's certainly been a game changer. I'm a huge fan of the Nerve Block app. I absolutely love it. I think it's an absolutely killer app. Have you encountered any colleagues that feel like your apps have changed the way they practice or the way that they operate in the emergency department?
Like that, because it's nice. I use these all the time. And like I said, it was the main purpose of making this, but it does make me really happy when I hear that people enjoy them too. But yeah, I joke, but it's true. I'm not very bright. I don't want to have to memorize all this stuff. If to this day, it's like a distal radius fracture, and I'm like, what do we put on those? It's like, it shouldn't be, I shouldn't be that dependent on it, but it's fine. There's a thing there for me to use. And I'm like, oh, okay, that's what I thought.
That's awesome.
I feel like that kind of takes me back to your teacher telling you won't always have the calculator, but you built the calculator in real time to use. I don't think she accounted for that. One question I am curious, because you've mentioned that you have a suite of things that work for you. And I'm curious, just like, what are some of the favorite, doesn't have to be like an actual large language model, but what are some of the favorite AI tools that you're using currently? And it can be like at work or for kind of the purposes of designing.
So Cursor for like code is what I've been using and is incredibly helpful. I like play around with all of the major LLMs, and honestly, I just put in what I want and see which one gives me the best output. OpenAI still seems the farthest ahead for me, so that's what I depend on most. But yeah, I think like Claude is great. I use DeepSeek too. So any of those kind of like, if I'm not even sure which response I like best, I'll have 6 tabs open and I paste the same prompt into all of them and see what comes out. Aside from that, I haven't really used a lot of the generative UI stuff. I don't know. They all end up putting out something that looks too similar. A little inspiration here or there can be helpful. But yeah, I think most of the time I'm going to Chat GPT to do stuff.
For sure, which I think segues into the kind of this question, which I think we are thinking about a lot now, is most medical software, of course, Epic being the biggest one, is built by large companies. Do you see a future where it's like individual physician created software, what you do, disrupting this space now that we have all these tools to quickly code, and you can put something together a lot more rapidly than in the past. Is that kind of the future? Is these smaller groups or even individuals disrupting that space?
I hope so. I think that would be very helpful to have more options, but it seems unlikely. I don't know that anyone should trust the output for the security requirements of an EHR. I think probably most likely those companies will leverage the technology to make things work a little bit more efficiently. Because I could certainly, and I think some of them are already doing this, but I could certainly see the large EHR makers configuring things so that you can interact with the patient's chart in a more conversational way. I think like way down the road, probably UI disappears altogether and you just talk and say what you want to order, and then it suggests something else. And you're like, yeah, cool, do that.
Yeah, the ambient world.
You're like, oh yeah, no, that's a good idea. We should order that.
Yeah.
Do you think that physicians will be, I guess, the ones? Let me scale back actually, and Ethan, just clip this out. But starting that one over again. So currently, we do have these large corporations, and even if someone did have kind of your skill set, as you just mentioned, it's really hard to break into the EMR market. I do wonder, and want to get your thoughts on it. Do you think there will be a segue to get greater input from physicians on the software that we're using, or will it really still be a top-down approach?
I wish. I think there's no reason why the introduction of this technology should change that. The opportunity existed beforehand to seek advice and feedback from the users of these applications. And I'm sure they do to some extent, but it's probably a similar problem of having too many stakeholders with too many opinions, resulting in this kind of behemoth software output. I think that's one of the main struggles I have using the major EHR applications is that it doesn't seem like there's that love of wanting the user to experience something approaching delight when they interact with your application. I feel like I I suffer making these things. Like I worry about every pixel, and I sit there and I'm like, in any other state, someone would say, yeah, this application is ready for release. And I'm like, no, that is 2 pixels over. And that on this device doesn't look quite right. And I don't get the sense that's happening somewhere inside of these giant companies. I think that's the problem. If, for example, again, way down the road, the interface was so customizable that you could detail what you wanted from your EHR just by describing the functions that you wanted, and it could generate a UI for you based on that, then, maybe that would be a way where it's like real time feedback and the output is customized to you. Cause yeah, it all sucks. Every single one I've used, it's always, oh, that's not good.
So true. Here's a controversial question. I think the software development world, I think, argues that maybe doctors shouldn't be coding, shouldn't be developing apps and things like that. What's your response to that? Do you think, I often think if you have that skill set and you also have the understanding of the very dynamic clinical environment, that you're really empowered, but obviously there are a lot of people out there that disagree with that. What are your thoughts?
I haven't heard that. Who's saying that?
People are saying, okay?
People are saying.
I heard that's a justifiable way
This
to.
is demanding an expletive. Yeah, I mean, I think I can't see a reason why someone wouldn't be able to make something for their own use as a minimum. I think being conscientious about what you're making, I guess a potential issue would be that you create something that offers inaccurate recommendations. I think that would be certainly a concern. And I think having some sort of auditing of content to make sure that you're providing something that's productive is helpful. But yeah, I think anyone who can should. And I think in the next few years, a lot more people will be able to do that.
Awesome. Yeah. Agree.
I totally agree with you. And I think, as you're saying, the tools like Cursor or Replit, they're really democratizing the way that coding is done. And so even if that were true at one point in time, Ethan, you tell those people in the future no longer true. Okay.
Those people, I tell you what.
Tell those people that. Okay. I think one thing that I do worry about is the adoption curve. I think when we look outside of medicine, we see areas of business and commerce really flocking to the technology, utilizing it and experimenting with it. Obviously, medicine, we take things a little bit slower. We just got rid of our pagers last year in our hospital. I don't know about you. Maybe you still have them, but I guess adoption has been slow. But in so much of as that could be a development issue, what do you think are some mistakes and maybe some of the things that designers should pay attention to, specifically when designing for emergency physicians?
Yeah, I think it's certainly understandable that there's a delay in adopting new technology. It's like a high risk field, and the tolerance for error should be very low. And I think that reasonably explains why pagers still exist. It's like a highly reliable tool for communication. The danger from incorporating new technology, I think, is real. And I think anyone who's interacted with these AI models knows that suspicious output sometime. And I think that relying heavily or too heavily on them is certainly problematic. I think from an optimal outcome standpoint, it would be that these tools become simply a repository of organized data, ideally following some standard, but the hospital and healthcare system will simply manage a secure database of detailed information related to each patient. And then you have a broad way of representing that information. Because I think we all use these EHRs that are barely tailored for the setting. And I think if the role of the EHR was simply to interpret and present this organized data, then there'd be a much better opportunity to create something that's specific to the field. So for us, it would be a more EM streamlined interface instead of like an inpatient tool with a couple extra tabs for EM, or something that doesn't really help us the way that we need to use that information.
Yeah, completely agree. Yeah, I think we seem to be hedging on this conversation about the EHR, which I think is like a huge topic. We'll have to save that for like almost another episode with you, Tom. But transitioning to our next sort of set of questions, I wanted you to maybe, and this probably dovetails very nicely in what you were just saying. I think emergency physicians are trained to make these fast, critical decisions, but I think a lot of software development, at least in the past, maybe not now, has been slow and very iterative and involves a lot of debugging. How do you adapt to this mindset shift is what we wanted to ask you.
Yeah, I think actually the capacities demanded of an ER physician are really applicable to development too. Again, I'm sure that someone with formal experience in this may respond differently, but when I'm building something, there is this managing of multiple areas simultaneously and interacting in a bunch of different components of the application at the same time. And I think that kind of like a task switching capacity that we are pretty good at. And the most interesting things happen when I'm struggling with something for a while and I take a moment, just step aside and let things settle. And then you come back and you have a new approach or a new sort of perspective on what you were trying to do. And I think that kind of helps with the streamlining of building something. But yeah, I think I build stuff the way an ER doctor would, which is somewhat haphazardly with code duct taped together. And if it works, you ship it. Like, I don't think there's any significant difference. It's how we work.
Just dermabond it and see if it holds.
Strips of gauze between components, and then looks good.
MacGyver never dies, guys. MacGyver never dies. So along that line, we know that EM folk are industrious, but they may not have kind of the technical skills you do. So what would your advice be for someone who wants to follow in your path, start designing things for themselves and finding solutions, but doesn't really know where to start?
Yeah, I'm often asked this question. I think the easiest approach is to not to make things too complex. So the vast majority of the tools that might be beneficial to an ER physician work just as well as a website. And it can just make sure that it's mobile optimized. And a lot of these kind of out of the box solutions do that for you. And you just can use some kind of tool that you're already familiar with and start building something. And again, see what the response is like. And if it's something that's valuable, people will always use it, even if it doesn't work like a native mobile application. The emphasis people place on that, I think, is too much. It doesn't have to. Like, and the features that are unavailable to a mobile optimized website are so few that it's not worth the effort for most people to try to dive into code and create an account on an app store and publish an application and then maintain it. It's not necessary. So if anyone has an idea that they want to trial, just make a website and put it out there, and you'll get 95% of the functionality that you need just from that.
Oh, that's great advice.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really great advice. We've been talking about this quite a bit already, but I think if you had some sort of magic wand and you could fix something about medical software, I know we've been talking about the EHR, but maybe medical software in general, or the EHR, however you want to take this question. I think this is a pretty broad-based question. What would it be? What would your approach be?
I mean, I think I'm trying to reflect on the tools that I use on a daily basis. So obviously EHR being the heaviest one, but other things would be like Pax.
Muse.
Yeah. Oh God.
I hope they're not listening.
Does not reflect the views of our employers.
Yeah, and I think it probably boils down to a lack of attention to the user's experience. Even something as simple as like a messaging app, which your facility might use for communication, since we've now moved away from pagers. Messages is better. Like WhatsApp is better, and the functionality is identical. And I don't know why, because we use blank healthcare messaging tool, it has to be like 40% worse in every way. It's just, it seems unnecessary. And I think it just lends to a lack of interest. I guess in their favor, they have a different set of priorities. So things like reliability and security. And so as a result, things like interface and interaction just fall to the bottom, which I guess is understandable, but that's why we feel the pain, because the security and reliability are assumed. And so we just end up using an inferior product because that's simply not a priority from the team that develops it. And I think that's probably the main issue that we experience.
Yeah, I think we've seen recently some apps being embedded into the EHR, such as like MD Calc and things like that. I don't know if you picture in a perfect world, I think some of your apps would be great embedded, or at least alongside the EHR, or maybe they're better just having separated from the formal system, from the network system. But I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I've used those tools when they're incorporated, and it goes a long way, right? Especially if it has the ability to import the patient's information. You skip a couple of steps, like it's huge.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I've never tried, so I don't know exactly what the integration lift is, but yeah, I
Right.
definitely appreciate when things like that are incorporated. And I can absolutely see a future where the EHR can simply output a relevant score. Like I shouldn't even have to determine that this note requires a perk. Like it should just be like,
Right.
oh, this seems like he's thinking
Yeah.
PE, we should put in a perk score. And it can aid with documentation, but also with decision making. Because a lot of times when I'm charting, I'm like, oh, their heart rate was 100. Maybe I should do something. And it would be much easier if the tool absorbed some of that effort. Because even now, we're still talking like 3 clicks to find the MD Calc thing, to pop it open, and then maybe add in a missing detail. So there's always room to improve. But I definitely appreciate when simple things like that are incorporated.
Yeah. I think my vote would be for the fracture app to replace the MSK diagram. I could just click on it and it would show up. But seriously, again, this has, I think, been amazing. And I think you have the exact right insight. coming from an emergency physician with your background, it really sounds like you've thought a lot about these things. I do wonder what's next for you, and are there any exciting projects or ideas that you're working on that we should be watching out for? Because
That you're willing to share.
that you're willing to share, and maybe it's time to make your wife happy. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
No, I'm always tinkering. I've noticed about myself that I'm just happier when I have a thing to work on. I just released a new antibiotic app. So similar purpose as all the other applications, just very simple, straight to the point recommendations on antibiotics to give. So we'll see how that one goes. And I'll have a brief break until I think of the next thing.
Do you want to plug it? What's the name of that one?
It's very creatively named antibiotic.app.
I love it. I love it. I was really hoping you kept the creative naming scheme going.
Have you thought about, or in any of your sort of upcoming ideas and designs on, and again, I love the way that your apps are designed, and this is probably just muddying the water, but in terms of incorporating some of the generative AI technology into them, or has that crossed your mind, or where would you take that, I guess?
Yeah, I've really enjoyed the opportunities that have come with this crazy new capacity. I, again, tinkered with a couple of AI-based applications. So one of them is called bot phrase, like BOT phrase, where it's generate dot phrase. So you would enter the complaint or diagnosis and it would create a dot phrase for you. The other one is called USIM. And that was, again, using large language model for chat-based medical simulation scenarios, which worked surprisingly well with like very little modification. So you type in a diagnosis and it creates a scenario that you can walk through. So yeah, I think there's lots of opportunities there. It's super exciting because anything that I thought would be impossible a few years ago is suddenly very doable. So like for the antibiotic thing, I'm working on this, but basically you would upload antibiogram and then get facility specific recommendations. And it's not that hard.
That's so
It
cool.
ingests random PDFs, like every different. And sometimes it's 4 on one page, or they're every other page, and there's random content between, and it gets it.
Wow. That's so amazing. It's just, it's such a game changer.
I think what's interesting to me is I feel like the whole world of prompt engineering has fallen by the wayside as the models just get smarter. Like my prompt engineering has gotten less, and it just does better. I don't know. There's a trade-off here, and I'm not sure what, but I agree with you wholeheartedly.
Yeah, now it's just plug in task into the major models and see which one performs better. It's not even I don't engineer anymore. So like the antibiogram one, Google Gemini randomly is the best antibiogram interpreter in the world.
Wow.
I would not have expected that.
Yeah.
Definitely not. Yeah. Wow.
See, now that's a study right there, Tom. You sure you don't want to come over to the research side?
Yeah. I think DJ and I do the exact same thing. We just have all the models open. And we're just like plugging in to see which one can help us the best. So I guess everyone does that now.
Yeah.
It's a brave
Awesome.
new world.
Yeah. This has been an amazing conversation, Tom. I really appreciate your time, and DJ and I are huge fans of your apps, and I'm so excited to see what's coming down the pipeline with all this new technology out there. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah,
No,
absolutely.
thank you both. I had a great time. I really appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And again, keep up all the great work on all the amazing applications. Look forward to playing with the antibiotics.app when it comes out.
Yeah, it's going to be great.
Maybe eventually sell one. Yeah, I don't know.
Thanks so much for listening to episode 11 of the Stat AI podcast. If you get a chance, check us out on X and Instagram and our newly updated website, stataipodcast.com. And make sure to tune in next month for some more amazing content. Thanks so much and take care.
Please note that the views, opinions, and information expressed in this podcast are solely those of the individual speakers and do not necessarily represent those of their employers, our sponsors, or any affiliated organizations. The content provided is for informational and educational purposes and is not intended as medical advice. We encourage you to consult with qualified healthcare professionals for any medical concerns or treatment decisions. This podcast is not a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Listener discretion is advised.